Okay, in this video we're going to talk about teaching your dog to stay for distance. Now, you should not be practicing this unless your dog has achieved a 5-minute stay for duration with your puppy just right here. It's probably the most common mistake people make. So what we're going to do is basically build on what we did before, but now we're going to take steps away. So I'm going to put, and remember, every time you do this, always release your dog at the end with the release word. Otherwise your dog will have what's called an auto release and it'll start moving away on its own. So basically I'm going to do the same format. I'm going to be facing the dog. Now this time I'm going to be doing it from a stand. And remember, if your dog prefers to stay in an LAY position, put them into a lay down. Or if they prefer sitting, just go with whatever's easier to start the behavior. All right, so I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to give him the stay, and then I'm going to put my hand back to my breast. I'm going to take one step backwards, and I'm going to count to 2, then take one step backwards and give him the treat. Then I'm going to give him the stay command again, and this time take 2 steps backwards and count to 4. Now this is my genesis. This is how I always start off with double the length of time based on the number of steps that I take away. However, every dog is unique, and there's nothing wrong with going at whatever pace. And if your dog is going over, if you get to a certain distance and your dog starts moving away, back up a step, practice that previous step a couple more times before you try that step again. All right, we're going to go ahead and have the camera back up a little bit so we can do a little stay for distance. And then of course this is my buddy Quest. All right, Quest, stay, 1, and I count 1, 2. You're not going to count in your brain at home, but make sure you get in the habit of doing stay. You're going to count in your brain, don't do it out loud. You can do it out loud too, I guess, but I would recommend just doing it. Stay, 1, 2, I'm going to count to 4. Stay. 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 Now, I was a little bit sloppy on the previous step previous to this, so make sure if you want to use a hand signal, I use this because that's pretty ubiquitous with dogs, is this means stay. So the process is give the stay command, stay, put it back to your breast, take the steps back, 2, 3, 4, count. Stay. And then remember, always do the release. Release. Now, for this one, again, you want to practice in very short iterations. You're going to practice whatever distance your dog is at. And if you go for, let's say you start off at 2s, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, always end on a good one. And then next time you might do 3s, 3, 6, 9, 12, and so on and so forth. But again, if you make a jump and your puppy at any time gets up, you need to back up, practice to the previous step. And again, don't push this one for too long. For this point, until you are at least 20 paces away, you should not be waiting longer than about, well, every dog is unique, so I don't want to put a stipulation there. But again, work on distance. Now, the next move is going to be move out of sight. So we're going to do this again. I'm going to show you this, but this one you don't want to move out of sight until you can be at least 20 paces away from your dog and have them consistently stay in the stay position. Quest, here, Quest, puppy, target. It's a nice illustration of what a hand targeting exercise that can help. All right, so I'm going to say stay, and I'm going to step just behind this little post here, so barely going to obscure me. When you're doing this, you want to get to the point where there's a doorway 20 paces away, and the first time that I move out of distance, I'm only going to be out of distance for 1 second before I come back. Stay. Stay. Now I stayed a little bit longer there than I actually normally would. And again, Quest knows how to do it. The first time you do it, you like literally step here and then walk back to your dog. That's going to be really hard when you start moving out of your dog's sight. And if your dog gets up and moves towards you, that means you need to practice more on duration and distance without being out of the dog's sight. Now, once you get to the point where you're out of your dog's sight, then you're going to start building up the time of how long you're out of your puppy's sight before you come back. And again, go very progressively, very slow and methodical. The idea for this, and I mentioned this in the previous video, I'm going to mention it again, 100% success rate. Actually, I don't know if I mentioned in the previous video, but you need 100% success rate. So we practice something called 5 for 5. So if I want him to stay for like 10 seconds, Well, I wouldn't necessarily do that for the stay because it's going to be too long, but practice a couple of times at that distance or that duration before you increase it to make sure your puppy has it. And that's a good example of where Quest, even though he's my dog, and he knows how to stay, he's a little bit out of practice. I waited too long and I'm talking too long, so he said, oh, we're done with this, and he auto-released. Target. We'll do that one more time, we're going to do it the proper way. Stay. Stay. And then you would keep repeating this 5, 6, 10 times, whatever you want to do. When you're done, release. Quest, you did a very good job. And then make sure afterwards you play with your puppy a little bit. Give it some attention. Let it know that it did a really good job, because this is really difficult for the puppy. We need them to understand that they made us, that they pleased us. Quest, can we sit? Well, this is my buddy Quest. He wants to shake. This is how you can teach your dog to stay for duration.